right, guys, it is Friday at 3 o'clock, so it's time for another Tech Tip Happy Hour. So today's topic is ransomware. We've all heard about this on the news constantly. So first, what is ransomware? So to simplify it a little bit, let's assume that all your data for your computer is in an impenetrable safe that you can only get through with the door, and it has a 4-digit PIN code that you use every single day to access your documents. And a bad actor gets in and changes that safe code to be 256 characters, letters, and numbers. So there's no way you're ever going to guess that code or get that code without anybody giving it to you. That is essentially what happens when ransomware occurs. They encrypt all the files on your computer, which is a legitimate process for encryption, but then it makes so that your documents are inaccessible without that code. And then they hold that code and the ability for you to recover those files for ransom. And then they demand a number, a financial number of either in dollars or cryptocurrency usually, that they deem is, ability for you to pay, but it's not a nice number for you to pay, but you would be able to pay it. They're not going to ask a small business that does $1 million in a year for $70 million because they're never going to be able to pay. So typically they scale it based on your ability to make sure that you can pay because it's a business. They do this because it works. They make the money. You hear on the news all the time of the companies paying the ransom, which is why you see these attacks happening more and more often because the companies have to in order to stay in business. So how do we protect against ransomware? It's a 3-tiered approach. So the first one is you need to make sure that your endpoints are protected as much as possible, which you need a next-gen protection tool, something like we use SentinelOne. There's CrowdStrike out there, Cylance. There's any number of these endpoint protection to protect your computers. And then you need to make sure that you're educating your employees. So all your employees should be taking some sort of annual cybersecurity training to help mitigate the risk of them doing something that then causes ransomware to be on the network. And the third thing is to make sure that you have the proper type of backup. You want an offsite backup solution that has versioning, and you also want a local backup if possible, if you have a large amount of data that you could then recover quickly. And when we say versioning, what we mean is that you have different versions of the files, because if all your data gets encrypted and you try to and you miss it overnight and now it just backed up and the only backup you have is from the day before with all your encrypted files, it doesn't do you any good. So you want to be able to roll back to a day ago, a week ago, a month ago's version of the files. And you also, if possible, if you have a lot of data, to have a local option so you could restore quicker than just from the cloud. If you have just a small amount of data, just a cloud-only backup is fine. And you also want to make sure that you're working with a firm that's protecting you, monitoring all the access to your equipment, all your accounts, to make sure that they can spot something if something weird, comes up. And we also want to make sure that every company is looking at the possibility of getting cyber insurance. We know it's can be expensive, but you can get some smaller policies with stated limits for a reasonable amount of money to cover you in case of an infection. A final thing I want to say is a lot of people look at some of the investment required for cybersecurity and they say, I don't want to pay an extra $20, $50, 75, 100, 500, 1,000, whatever it is based on the size of your company. But if you frame it in the way to say, if you did get infected and you lost all your files and we told you, hey, at that point for $50 a month beforehand, you could have not had that happen, would you do it? And I think the majority of people would say that we would have much rather paid a little bit of money over time than instead of paying, a huge amount of money at once just to get back to the point you were before, because, if you have to recover from ransomware, you're not gaining anything by all that money and effort that you're spending, you're just getting back to where you were before. That being said, today's drink is called the Ransom Note. So we are going to use Ransom's Old Tom Gin. So we're going to have 2 ounces of this. Right, smells good. I had to order this gin online. It's not the easiest thing to get in Pennsylvania, but you can get it if you order it online. And then we're going to have 3/4 ounces of honey syrup, which is basically just hot water and honey mixed equal parts and about, quarter of a cup of each. Add a little sweetness there. And then we're going to have 3/4 of an ounce of mead. We're using Bunratty mead today. Mead has been making a comeback. There's some local companies that are starting to stock this. You should see this in your liquor stores pretty soon. And then you need some lemon juice. It says 1/4 of an ounce. That's going to be a little bit more than 1/4 of an ounce, but I think we're going to live. All right, and then we're going to put this in our cocktail shaker and try to shake this without making a huge mess. This isn't the best thing for video, but we'll survive. All right, that looks pretty frosted. We're going to pour this in here. That's good. All right, guys. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.